A mere 2 months after The Courtship of Princess Leia was released in hardcover, Bantam released the second book in the Jedi Academy Trilogy, Dark Apprentice by Kevin J. Anderson. Now, Dark Apprentice did both better and worse than Jedi Search had done, reaching number 2 for the week of June 26, 1994 on the New York Times paperback bestseller list, and ultimately staying on the list for a total of 6 weeks. So my recollection of this book, once again, was not right. I guess I had forgotten how much of this book was just straight up filler, and I thought that there was going to be a lot more action than there actually was. But on the plus side, Leia had more to do than she did in the first book, so that's always a good thing. So, a brief summary. Luke Skywalker opens his Jedi Academy on Yavin 4 and begins to teach the new generation of Jedi. However, a dark presence lurks nearby. Admiral Ackbar is involved in an horrific accident and returns to his homeworld in solitude, while Admiral Dala sets out on a one-woman guerrilla warfare quest to just make a big mess and annoy the New Republic. So, on my Princess Leia costume count, was once again a bust. She wore an interesting, futuristic, organic wetsuit on calamari, but otherwise we didn't have anything. But on the other costume count, Han went skiing in the beginning, and he gave Kype Durron a sparkly black cloak. So, the characters. I didn't really like what Anderson did with Luke in the first book in Jedi Search, and I really did not like what he did with Luke in this book. Luke is particularly ineffective and indecisive to the point that it strains disbelief. When Gantoris makes a lightsaber and challenges him to a duel, Luke doesn't really intervene. And then when Gantoris presumably spontaneously combusts, Luke doesn't alert anyone. And then when Kype Durron just falls to the dark side, again, he's like, doesn't confront him, doesn't really try to address this. So by the time you have Luke at the end, barely alive, knocked out on the top of a pyramid, you don't really sympathize with his plight because he did this to himself. And on the other side, we don't really get very many examples of him teaching. Luke's teaching style seems to be, let my students do whatever they want. But since so far, doing whatever they want meant that 2 of them have fallen to the dark side and 1 of them is dead, I think is not a good teaching style, and he maybe needs to switch it up a little. Leia, after being pretty useless in the first book, actually had things to do, and it was exciting, and I enjoyed it. She's feeling very stressed because Mon Mothma keeps offloading more and more responsibilities on her. And then she is a direct witness to Admiral Ackbar's horrific accident on the world of Vortex that takes out the Cathedral of Winds and kills many, many people. So when Mon Mothma finally confesses that she's dying, Leia says, we need Ackbar back. We need his voice of moderation, which, okay, I guess he's moderate compared to the other ones. He's never seemed very moderate on the smuggler front, but I'll let that slide. So she goes to Calamari, and she is once again a direct witness to Dala's attack of the planet. I like when Leia's able to combine her diplomatic side with her action side, and this book did that pretty well. So, I'm actually pleased with Leia's plotline in this one. However, I am not pleased with Han's plotline in this book at all. I maybe gave Anderson too much credit when I said that he wrote Han really well and Han felt the closest to the actual movie characters, because in Dark Apprentice, he does not feel like movie Han at all. He's awful. He, out of nowhere in the beginning, is jealous and irrationally angry at Lando helping and the Falcon, so they play a sabacc game to see who the Falcon should belong to. It goes to Lando. Then they play it again. It goes back to Han. Then they play it for a third time. And the only reason Han has the Falcon at the end of the book is because Lando wanted to look really generous in front of Mara Jade. So it's stupid. I guess after having so many things to do in book 1, Anderson didn't know what to do with Han in book 2, and so he and Lando literally do nothing. Lando continues to sadden me, disappoint me. He's here, but he's just along on this stupid sabacc game subplot. He's just wants to look good for Mara Jade. And that's another thing. Mara Jade shows up in this book, which is cool. Finally. I love her. They talked about it in the first book. She finally shows up in this book. She is different from Zahn's depiction of her. Zahn's depiction of her was a lot more nuanced. You could see both her good qualities and her bad. Here she's very two-dimensional. She's just this sort of snappy, cold woman. And this is also the first iteration we see of sexy Mara, which unfortunately other authors will adopt, and which is not really a thing that I got from the Thrawn trilogy at all, so it was disappointing to see this interpretation of her appear. Luke's Jedi Academy contains a dozen students. Well, it's 13 or 14 once we get to the end, once you add Kype Durran and Sogal, the Mon Calamari ambassador. But we really only get names for a half dozen of them, which is great when Michael A. Stackpole decides that he wants to insert Corran Horn into the Jedi Academy at this point in the time span. Gantoris, he chose poorly. He died poorly. Farewell, Gantoris, we barely knew you. Kype's descent into darkness doesn't feel realistic or well-developed to me, mostly because it's just so abrupt. We get like one chapter of Kype training, and he wants to learn everything there is to know, and he wants to be the best Jedi, and he's sort of a loner. And then immediately after that, Exar Kun appears and tempts him and is teaching him all this hidden knowledge, hidden in more ways than one, because we, the reader, never really find out what this hidden knowledge is. So I liked Kype in the first book. He was sort of a stand-in for Luke. Unfortunately, he loses his interest for me starting in this book, mostly because his just subplot is so poorly written. I actually really like the plotline going on with Admiral Ackbar here, where he accidentally kills all these people. Well, he thinks it's an accident. We, the reader, know that this was a setup and that his ship was sabotaged, but no one else knows this. And he's so filled with guilt and remorse that he resigns his post, returns to his homeworld, is trying to restore the damage that was done there during the Dark Empire comic. And I really like that. It's something we don't usually see in Star Wars. He didn't destroy a Star Destroyer, destroy a Death Star. He destroyed civilians, and he didn't mean to, and he tried till the very end to save them, and he feels horrible about it. And his plotline is more, how do you reconcile something that you didn't mean to do with the consequences, the aftermath? On the villain front, Dala is a strategic moron. She started out this trilogy with 4 Star Destroyers. By the end of Jedi Search, she had lost one of them to the forces of Kessel, and in this book, she loses 2 more Star Destroyers. She's an admiral, but she's an admiral because of this weird sort of romantic nepotism. I can't see, with the skills that she displays in these 2 books so far, how she would have ever naturally achieved that rank. And the fact that she just continues to hang around in later books, especially, I'm looking at you, Darksaber, where Captain Palayan is following her, it just blows my mind. Exar Kun is also a shadowy presence in more ways than one. I guess his motivations are that he's evil and he wants to dominate everything. But right now he's limited to Yavin 4. So why did he never show himself when the rebellion had a base on the planet? They seemed to be there for a fair bit amount of time. And Luke also was there for a little bit of time. And then when one of Luke's students dies in very suspicious circumstances, he chooses to stay on Yavin 4. If I were him, I would have immediately made a call to the New Republic and be like, there's something weird going on here. Please come and pick us up and take us somewhere else. But so I think the main issue with this book is that it's clunky. It is just so unbelievably clunky. Scenes don't flow smoothly. They just sort of, they're there, and then they're there, and then they're there. Kype's fall to the dark side is like a key example of that. We just lurch from event to event. It almost feels like Anderson plotted out what he wanted to happen, and then he didn't really take the time to flesh it out in more detail, so we just have like the highlight reel. And we don't get much more development than that. I also have to add that Han and Leia's toddler twins continue to be characters. There is a subplot where they run away from the zoo and are wandering around the lower levels of Coruscant and acting out their favorite storybook, The Little Lost Bantha Cub. Why? Why? I know it's gonna get worse, but why?
And can I just interject in this voiceover to talk about one of the aspects that I really hated about this novel? The romantic pairings that Anderson introduced. So first off, we have Wedge Antilles and the scientist Quishush, which I don't understand anything about this. I don't understand what he sees in her and she sees in him. I also don't understand why he's a general, but he's been assigned as her bodyguard. Surely there are much more important tasks that he can be doing than following around a beautiful blue feather-headed alien. And then our second relationship that Anderson introduces is Lando and Mara Jade. At least for this one, I can see it from Lando's side. I can 100% see Lando flirting and trying to schmooze his way into her good graces. But I do not see Mara reciprocating in any way. I feel like she would know all his buttons and would not fall for any of that. And the worst part is that both of these continued on. Lando and Mara are still going strong in the Callista books. Wedge and Qui didn't break up until the final X-Wing book. So these lasted for a while. Lasted long enough to annoy me for a few more books.
That's not to say that everything in the book is bad. Obviously, I liked Leia's plotline. I liked Ackbar's plotline. I really liked what Anderson did with Calamari. It felt interesting and novel and alien in a really cool way. But unfortunately, the book as a whole really suffered from that second book filler syndrome, where you've set everything up and then you want to have this big conclusion, but you need stuff in the middle. And so unfortunately, the stuff in the middle is just not well done. So, with that behind us, I'll be moving on next to the final book of the Jedi Academy Trilogy, Champions of the Force.